know how many supply chain conferences you guys have been to. I've been to a bunch. And it almost feels required to have a technology in logistics or innovation in logistics. So we felt like this is always, or at least certainly has been for the last 10 years, an important topic. So we wanted to do it, but we wanted to do it and have it be the best one possible. So really the key to doing that is getting the best guest possible. So Will, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, but I'll do a quick preamble. So Will has been with Prologis for 20-something years. He'll share a little bit more about the full scope of the business. But from my perspective, I think it's a fair statement to say that there's not another single company in logistics, at least in the Western Hemisphere, that has a broader perch or view of the logistics industry. Not a single one, just given the breadth of their physical infrastructure, the buildings, and then over the past, 8 to 10 years, all of the additional services and innovations that the company's been developing. So that's my preamble. But if you wouldn't mind, give us a bit of your background and just the background on Prologis.
Yep. So as Karl said, I've been at the company for over 21 years. Prologis owns 1.3 billion square feet of real estate, logistics facilities in 20 different countries. Because of that, we have, as Karl was alluding to, a pretty interesting, unique purview into what's happening in the supply chain, because we happen to own about 10 to 15% of the skeleton that is underneath the supply chain. We as a company really shifted our mentality and thoughts probably 6-7 years ago, where real estate's an industry that's unique, where you spend 3 months negotiating a contract with a customer and then aggressively try to ignore that customer for the next 5 years. Like every other industry, you try to figure out, how do I provide more value? How do I provide more services? So we realized with size and scale, we were actually in a really unique position to partner with our customers in ways that other people weren't able to, because we are this neutral party, this Switzerland that sits underneath. So my role for the last 8 years now, I started a venture capital group within the company, and also responsible for growth and corporate development. So what does that mean? It's really about how do we leverage our physical infrastructure to create new opportunities. So we're the largest operator of rooftop solar in the world. So we can provide renewable energy to our customers at or below the cost of the utility, but only 4% of our roofs are covered at the moment. So there's a huge opportunity for us to build out an energy company. We started an EV infrastructure business. We're starting an on-demand power business, so we can bring power to sites and create generation capabilities, so we don't have to wait 4, 5, 6 years for utilities to upgrade the grid. Another area we're spending a lot of time, and if you haven't met Sean, he's very noticeable. But Sean is on our operations essentials team, and that's really how do we partner with our customers to understand how we can help them extract the most value they can from the warehouse and supply chain network, which is actually a little bit of a shift in mentality for the company, because candidly, we benefit from inefficiency. Because the more inefficient our customers are, the more space they need. However, if we're looking long-term viability, that's not where our customers are heading, and that's not where, as a company, we want to be. So we're really investing heavily on how do we partner with our customers to do network planning, inventory capacity planning. We're spending a lot of time on the regulatory environment to understand what the implications are going to be on a state, local, and national level, and how do we help our customers evolve? What type of infrastructure and equipment would go into the warehouse? And then with that, Karl was actually our first investment in 2016, and we've made 53 other investments in startups in the space, really to kind of push ahead and drive change and transformation in this industry.
Yeah, so 1.3 billion square feet. And you said that's what, 10% or something?
It's like 10 to 15% of the warehouse stock in the countries we are.
Isn't there a stat that's like how much?
3% of the world's GDP goes through our warehouse.
That one.
Yeah.
Think about that. 3% of the world's GDP. And do you have a position in China?
Yes.
You do now? Okay.
We do. And actually that was early in my career, I opened up our China platform.
Okay.
So from 2005 to 9, I was in China a lot.
Okay, so that's a great foundation. Hopefully people get a sense of that breadth. So now pivoting to kind of innovation and technology specifically, from your the perspective of you as an investor, what are the kind of main areas of innovation that are on your and your team's radar in terms of best opportunities for investment in and around supply chain and logistics technology?
Yeah, so I'll start with innovation's a word that's used a lot. And I think because of it, it's kind of lost its meaning because everything can be innovation. But the way we've talked about it, I think about it internally, is innovation occurs when constraints are removed and white space opens up. And I'll give a couple examples of what I mean by that. So a lot of constraints are self-imposed. So how we deal with each other and our society, how we interact, what type of behaviors, those are all constraints we put on for norms. In business, the processes we put in place are done because it creates efficiencies and we learned over time, but they also could create constraints on how we do business. So 2 examples on that. Like the most successful day that McDonald's ever had was the day that they decided to stop serving breakfast. They could serve breakfast after 11:30 in the morning. And that was a self-imposed constraint that they had, and they obviously had to rejigger their supply chain and other things, but they opened up. And the other really interesting one, if you remember when the iPod first came out, it only actually worked on Macs. So you only could sell it to 3% of the audience because Steve Jobs hated the closed architecture of Windows and everything else. But when he actually removed that self-imposed constraint, suddenly the other 7% of the world could buy an iPod, and Apple became what it is. So a lot of what we've done internally is look at our own processes and understood, okay, just because we've done this for 10, 15 years, is that because it's best, or is this just a constraint we're putting on ourselves? And then when you look at technology, the major driver of change in technology is it removes constraints. So think of how many businesses have been started with because an iPhone exists. Now I can carry around a portable computer in my pocket that can tell Uber where I am at any time and match me with cars that are also on the same computer. So we're spending a lot of time really understanding, from our perspective, where pain points are, the constraints are causing it, but working with a lot of customers across a breadth of them so we can see where common pain points are and then understand what type of technology, what type of business process, what type of business models can be implemented and remove those constraints. And why I think it's important, especially in our industry, is it's very, very easy to get mesmerized by flashy objects. So like 4 or 5 years ago, was blockchain was going to completely revolutionize the world, and then it's Web 3, and now it's AI. And these technologies do have a place and can help solve challenges. But when you start with a clear understanding of the pain point, then it's a lot easier to go out and match, well, here's the best technology to remove the constraint or the friction to solve this pain point. And I think we've all been in the room where just AI bot comes in, or it's like, okay, blockchain's coming in, and it's very easy to get mesmerized by it. But when people actually take the step back and is this truly solving a business issue with an ROI, it helps filter out really quickly what's real and what's not. So we've been in a fortunate position where we've been able to build relationships across a lot of our customer bases. So we're looking at things like automation, what's real and what's not, and what are the KPIs that customers need to hit in order to adopt the technology. So to go back to your question, what we're interested in, AI is a big one. And like everyone, we are internally spending a lot of time figuring out how we can leverage AI and then also understanding the implications in our customers. And we can spend more time on that in a bit, but robotics and automation are a big area, data analytics. So how do we create more seamless integrations between different siloed systems? So how do you get your automation to talk to your WMS in a more seamless manner? But also the data that creates suddenly can be really valuable to be able to to run analysis against to get operational improvements. Transportation's intersection with warehouse is an area we spend a lot of time. So how do we digitize the yard? How do we pass information back to the operators so it can be used to help make decisions? Risk management is an area. By my comments earlier on the businesses we started around energy, that's an area we're spending a lot of time. Part of it, we've started building data centers, and they're fairly energy intensive. But as we put in infrastructure in for EV charges, you have to upgrade the power of the building to do it. And even we have customers when you're putting chillers in or upgrading to different types of automation. Buildings weren't set up 10 years ago to do that. So there's a high dependence on utilities to be able to update the grid. And essentially in the next 10 years, we're going to have to double the capacity of the grid in the US, which is about a $3 trillion investment. And it's just not going to happen quickly. So we've got to figure out ways, adoption of new power techniques. This is why nuclear is coming back. But we're starting to build out on-site generation to be able to help bridge this gap to get our customers up to speed. We're doing a lot of stuff around net zero and sustainability, both from a construction standpoint. So how do we use green concrete, green steel? How do we put HVAC, more efficient HVAC in? How do we use heat pumps? But then also looking kind of across the supply chain, how do we get better visibility into where transportation's leading to higher emissions and help our customers think about it strategically.
Got it. So a broad set of things. So let's double click into AI. We kind of can't not.
No, we have to.
But particularly from the perspective of, again, what you already said is you got a bunch of customers who are using a lot of things. And so from an investor perspective, you want to do diligence, you want to understand, to use your language, where are the constraints that are being successfully solved by AI? What are one or two things that you've seen that kind of stand out?
I'll talk a little bit on our journey that we went through to even allow us as a company to use AI. And for 5 or 6 years, we have been just pounding people internally, like, enter your data in the database, make sure it's correct, make sure your building characteristics. And it was just a fight. And part of it is, it was a very top-down driven directive of put the data in, and it wasn't being expressed in the terms of the person in the field, how a better database actually helps their job. 3 years ago, 35% of the company's bonus for everyone in the bonus was tied to us hitting 99% accuracy across 6 categories in data. And every week, a update by group was sent out on how people are performing. So miraculously, at the end of the year, we hit that. But it was highly fortunate because that happened to be the year that ChatGPT was introduced. So suddenly, we were able to build out, we had our proprietary data correct and in a data lake across all our systems. And I'm bringing it up is important because if you have shit data, you're going to get shit results. And no matter what, like when we talk internally a lot, if we digitize a crappy process, we just spend a bunch of money and still have a crappy process. So it's data, like as a starting point, getting accurate, usable data is critical. Now that we've done that, we have built out a Prologis GPT that sits on top of OpenAI. We have 2,900 employees and 2,400 of them use it on a weekly basis. We've had over 150 now customized GPTs built by employees and 15 enterprise ones. So what we're finding is people are starting to adopt it and bring it into their daily working life. And where it becomes most powerful, and I think it really ties back to the resiliency theme, is it allows where before a job may have taken 70 to 80% of the time to compile information and do research to be able to make a decision, we can now do that within 10% of the time. So we're allowing our people to upscale and spend their time thinking about how to react versus spending their time to try to pull data to even be able to begin a conversation. So taking it back to the question you asked, I think the most powerful thing is the tools that allow people to make decisions faster. Yeah. And the reality is, like, supply chain, no matter how good AI is, it will never be able to predict at the given moment a boat gets stuck in the Suez Canal, or like LA unfortunately burns down, or there's a flood, or a president decides to change tariffs, right? So we need to create a flexible, modular, resilient supply chain. But really, at the end of the day, what does that mean? It means the people operating it need systems in place where they can compile information as fast as possible and make an educated decision. And we're never going to get to a world where you're going to have 100% certainty. And if you got 100% certainty, you probably are trailing. But we need to be able to make directionally correct decisions as fast as we can in response to these situations. And that really gets into the resiliency, so tools that enable you to do that. I think the flexibility is, how do I adopt? And okay, well, the tariffs just changed again. How do we be able to shift and continually evolve? And I think it's one of the coolest things about supply chain is it's incredibly complex and continually fluid. But it is going to require humans to always be involved because you're going to have to be able to make decisions and make changes. And the more information I can present to people as fast as possible, the better they're going to be equipped to do that.
Yeah. Got it. So similar question for automation. Obviously, tons of innovation, tons of capital flowing in to fund new products and new product lines of more mature companies. A lot of activity.
Yep.
What have you seen in that sector that stands out? Like what about automation is particularly interesting to you?
Yeah, I think when we look historically at automation, I mean, it came out of manufacturing, which is a set process with a limited amount of SKUs and a repeatable process. That's not supply chain. In supply chain, you have almost an unlimited amount of SKUs and continual evolution. So part of the challenge with historic systems is, and we've kind of broke it into fixed versus modular. Most existing automation systems were heavily fixed. So you're putting in conveyors, you're putting in ASRS systems. As your business evolves and changes, it's hard to update the automation to do that. Or if you leave a building, there's not a lot of residual value where someone could come in and use that same set of automation. In the last 5, 6, 7 years, with the introduction of the AMRs, which are the robots, you're seeing people tack more of the business processes that you can then adopt the automation for multiple uses, and it tends to be a lot more flexible. So a company like Locust that does picking and packing, like I could do it with t-shirts, I could do it with toothbrushes, I could do it with toys, and you could take a Locust robot and put it in another warehouse and it will be able to adapt to that environment. So suddenly there's a residual value and it's scalable. So we've broken it down into kind of 6 or 7 key business processes that are repeatable across multiple warehouses. And then you're looking at best-in-class automation solutions for each of them. The challenge that exists with that is there's no silver bullet where I can go to one company and they can do everything. So I'm now having to sit on top, and how do you get the orchestration and 7 different types of automation to interact both with each other and your WMS and the humans in there. And that's where the complexity comes in. And one of the questions we get a lot is like, is the dark warehouse ever going to happen? I mean, you can see it in cold storage where someone's moving like frozen fish that is consistent, same box, same product, and it doesn't really change by season. But most logistics operations are very, very different. So I don't think you'll ever, not ever, you will at some point potentially get there, but I think it's going to be a while. People are mostly going to attack different business processes and then use it to really enhance the productivity of the people in the field. It's a challenge though, and we have a whole range of customers on sophistication, and even the ones that would be the most sophisticated, they're continuing to evolve and grow and test out new technologies.
So, and just to clarify, you talked about kind of, you break it down into 6 or 7 kind of categories. Those are like elements of the workflow. Like
yeah, it would be like put away storage, inbound, outbound, palletization, depalletization.
Yeah.
And they're relatively generic, but purposely, because then you can look across 30 different companies and see commonalities.
Yeah.
And part of what I think there's a lot of people who have made a lot of money in this industry by selling complexity. And yes, I can solve to the 99.999%, but that is an incredibly expensive, inflexible solution that the more we can commoditize some of the base processes, the more that you can scale and actually spread it out and bring down the cost.
When you say sell to complexity, you mean like just customized?
Is there any system integrators in the room?
You're safe. Go.
No, I mean, like, you look at system integrators, they come in, like, they're selling a very complex solution because it also embeds them into your organization for a long time because whenever you want to change. So I think across a lot of it, I mean, you look at AV at someone's house, like expensive houses, they hire someone to come in and do the AV, and you want to change it, and good luck. Like, warehousing's no different, and a lot of the system integrators happen to be owned by the hardware manufacturers, so they're trying to integrate their own book, versus it may not be the best decision for a customer. And it's also, at some point, like all things, that last 20% or last 10% might be 80% of the cost. And do you really need to do that, or can we commoditize that 80% well enough, and then people can focus on the secret sauce on top?
Yeah.
And I think that's an industry question of, like, the more people we can get together across different sectors with common specs, then you can start scaling it and push down costs. And for a technology company, there's huge benefits because then they're not trying to solve 1,000 different individual solutions. They're trying to solve an industry solution. So you have a race towards hitting certain KPIs or performance metrics, how they get there, but it needs to be consistent and then modular.
Right. Look, I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to run the risk of wading into generalities here.
Perfect.
But just to set up a discussion topic. So you'd framed it as kind of innovation is fundamentally how to remove constraints.
Yep.
At a general level, I'm channeling Kurt in some of his perspective on the panel earlier, but it's like at the end of the day, you're trying to create a customer, a would-be customer is trying to create some enterprise value. So to do that, I've either got to grow or I've got to cut cost, or ideally both. So that when you think about the ROI on an investment, like I'm a company, I'm going to buy this this AI tool, or I'm going to buy this piece of automation. I've got a business case behind it. Okay, so I can either justify that investment with cost savings, or this is going to help me grow. Maybe, I think increasingly there's an argument, an ROI argument that more people are believing in, which is like there's positive ROI if I can create some resilience for something unexpected. But it's like, is it going to help me grow? Is it going to help me cut costs? Maybe resilience. Okay, so those are the reasons anybody got to buy anything. In the context of the logistics space, which I think historically, and this is me generalizing, I think it's somewhat fair to say this is kind of like one of the world's largest cost centers.
Yeah.
Right? And you know, I can speak probably somewhat accurately for a lot of people in the room, like this is about cost. I've got to save, like this is a cost center, I need the cheapest price. And so with that long preamble and these customers that ultimately drive innovation because they either have a demand, you know, they either spend money on it or they don't. What have you seen over the business cycles of the past sort of 8 years? We had the pre-COVID, capital is free, you know, everybody's going to grow like gangbusters. You know, the universe is everyone's oyster. Like people were trying to find growth and fund growth, and then you had COVID, and then on the backside of COVID, a weaker economy, and everybody's slashing cost. How does that affect innovation in the market?
Looking at growth versus cost savings. In supply chain, cost savings are always a permanent part. The challenge with cost savings is once you've achieved them, it's then hard to justify on an annual basis. Like our costs went down and like you're now at a new baseline.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes technology companies that solely focus on the cost savings run into the challenges, because after I got those savings, it becomes the norm.
New baseline.
Right? That said, we are in an industry, and it's a supply chain for a reason. Like all the little nodes click together. And part of what's fascinating about it is it's a continual grind. And how do I squeeze more and more out? So I think part of where cost savings can also be framed, if it's strictly like, okay, what used to cost you $100,000 now costs you 80. Like, okay, that's a one-time thing, but a lot of the cost savings things are efficiencies, and there really could be measured in growth metrics. Like if you're doing something that increases throughput in a warehouse,
Right.
it would show up maybe in your P&L as a cost savings, but in reality, it's actually a growth metric because you're able to drive more value out of an existing asset, right? So I think philosophically, one of the things that I saw was, I mean, supply chain was always kind of hidden. It was there and everyone took it for granted. Until COVID happened, I really had no one at cocktail parties who'd be like, can you please explain and tell me about supply chain? And suddenly, everyone suddenly realized, like, wow, I went into the grocery store and nothing was there. I wonder what happened. Wow, okay, there's this thing called supply chain. So we saw a lot across our customer base, like supply chain suddenly and supply chain resiliency and moving it from just a static cost center to something that adds value. That started being an executive level conversation on a monthly, if not daily basis within our customers. And I think philosophically, that was one of the biggest changes. So you had that period during COVID where supply chain broke and capital was still free, that suddenly there was a ton of investment into the space. And there was a lot of money that was put into bad areas, like 15-minute grocery. I don't know how you can ever scale that and get the economics to ever work, but people decided to invest hundreds of millions of dollars doing that. But I think when we looked at it and really understanding how to drive throughput and efficiencies, then you could go after technologies that were solving that can both be on a cost savings, but it's really a growth metric because it allows your supply chain to generate more value than it previously did. I think the last 2-3 years, it's been a lot harder because one, on freight, it's been a horrible situation. Secondly, when your cost of capital goes up 2 to 3x, everything becomes more expensive. So piloting things, inventory management, inventory capacity. So people have had to get a lot tighter about measuring ROI. How do we test things quickly? How do we minimize unnecessary spend?
Yeah.
What's been really intriguing, and historically when this happens, you see investment curtail pretty significantly and customers stop trying new things. I really haven't seen that. Like customers they realize to be competitive, you need to be investing in things like AI and automation. People are being very thoughtful about it, but there hasn't been that was last year's thing, we're done. Yeah. It's more, we still got to invest, but help us be smarter about it. And how do we share information across groups better so we're not trying to do this on ourselves? So we're seeing a lot more cross collaboration amongst our customers and ourselves because people don't want to, if I have knowledge, I don't want to recreate the wheel. I'd rather start on second base than trying to do this on my own.
Right. Great. Questions? I've got more, but I want to open it up. Sean?
What do you think about digital twins?
Oh.
Digital twins.
Isn't it right? So Sean works with me, so this is a little bit of a softball. Digital twins have been around for a while, and for those, it's basically a 3D version of a physical asset. I think historically they've been kind of crap because it's like, okay, I can do a 3D version of a building and then I put my energy data through it and tells me how much energy my building's using. I don't really need a 3D twin to do that. I can look at a spreadsheet and I really only want to know when something's wrong. We're starting to see with AI and companies like NVIDIA that they're moving it to a new direction where the digital twin actually becomes an envelope that you can drop other digital twins in to run real-time scenario analysis. So what I mean by that is what we're looking at then is you can create a digital twin of a warehouse and every component that goes in, whether it's the robotics, the conveyor system, the racking, the humans are their own digital twin. So when you change things around instantaneously, everything has to adopt. So you can run real-time scenario analysis. So a way to think about this for autonomous vehicles, for example, what they build is a digital twin of the world, and then they're driving around the chipset. So it thinks it's in the real world, but it's really in a digital version. So if we apply that to a warehouse, what we're starting to experiment is, can we create a environment where instantaneously you can try thousands and thousands of different iterations. And when I make a change and move a conveyor system 10 feet to the left, everything in the warehouse has to adopt, and I can instantaneously see the impact on that. So I think this gets into, as these tools become more sophisticated and more powerful, being able to do that testing and analysis may have taken a month or 2 months and lots of money to do. But if we can use those tools, then instantaneously you can get feedback on decisions that allows us as a group to be much more proactive in how we're responding to changes in the environment versus having to spend a month or 2 months to realize, okay, I want to input this new automation system. What's it actually going to do to my workflow?
I want to pull in that thread just to.
Yeah.
So on an example like that, you're trying to get to learn and understand that technology better. How does that come to pass? Is it you have customers who are experimenting with those? So you say, hey, can I kind of ride shotgun with you and learn along with you? Or is it you have potential technology companies that could be potential investments, and so you say, hey, show me more about that, how this works, or how does it?
All the above.
Okay.
And I think we're headquartered in San Francisco. So by virtue of that, like, there's just a lot of technology around. But I think part of it comes down to because the position that we're in, and we've been pretty outgoing, I guess would be a good way to put it, about what we're trying to solve and partnering with different customers, partnering with different partners, that from a technologist standpoint, we can serve a benefit because we can bring syndicates of customers and ourselves to technologists and explain, here's the pain point. And then the same thing from customers, that we can go to them and say, here's what we're seeing, what's interesting you. So the digital twin one, for example, we're actually doing some work with NVIDIA related to data center, but we had done a couple deals with their venture team, and then went and they did a tour of their innovation center, and they showed us this digital twin, and we're like, we could take that and scale it. We also happen to know 4 of our customers are partnering with them on some components. So it's like, okay, well, let's all partner together and we can accelerate this faster.
Got it. Goes back to that breadth of your platform. I have another question. I didn't tee this one up earlier with you, but do you have a point of view or perspective on innovation in the U.S. Compared to innovation in China with respect to technologies that are relevant to supply chain?
Yeah, this one's interesting. China is fascinating from that perspective. And I would say a lot of really interesting innovations in supply chain technology have come out of China. They're in a lot of ways ahead on automation. You look at the super apps and how they build out. I mean, part of what they're able to do is jump to e-commerce and not have to worry about the historical retail networks that we have. So they kind of went to the answer. So a lot of how they set up their supply chain networks and hubs were related to where we are as an economy today versus where over the last 30, 40 years the US did it. I think we at one point started looking at doing investments there and then quickly decided not to. Investments from a venture side, both for political reasons, but there's a couple of things on the supply chain there. I mean, it's competitive and cutthroat here. It is the margins they're running on in China are ridiculously low. And there's always a couple set of books, and there's a lot of smoke and mirrors there that, and I ran China for the company for 5 or 6 years back in the early 2000s. So it's a really hard place to do business if you're not embedded on the ground and fully aware. And there's obviously a fair amount of political tension that exists between our countries right
I've
now.
heard of that.
Yeah. So, but when you look at what they've done in the models of like JD.com or Shein or Temu, I mean, it is really, really fascinating. And they have billion plus, I mean, 1.5 billion really motivated, smart people who are on this. But it's we've paid a lot of attention to what they're doing and then try to figure out how we can pull that back in the United States and leverage it here.
Okay, one more question for
Yeah.
you. And this is, so we've got folks from a bunch of companies here who tomorrow at some point will go back to their day job. And I'm hoping that they can take something, this has been fantastic, overview, and as intended, a very kind of high-level perspective and a broad perspective. From the perspective of, going back to work and trying to help either make decisions or help others make decisions around investments in new technologies, like any kind of just leave behind points of advice, I guess.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think the hardest thing I found and the thing I most underestimated was the amount of change management that you need to do to drive new technology adoption. And even if something's blindly obvious to you as an individual, it's going to be really hard for people to adopt it. And I mean, a simple test, like if you wear a watch, switch it to the other wrist and see how uncomfortable you are, right? And back to the norms, like I've done work a certain way because that makes me successful. So the instant I start challenging the process that someone goes through, a lot of people, when you ask them to describe their self-worth at work, they'll describe what they do during the day. There are other people, when you ask them their self-worth, they'll talk about the outcome they got. Majority of people are in the former. So a lot of it is the change management. And when I was talking about the data earlier, one of the things we really struggled with is we didn't do an effective job communicating why it was valuable for our maintenance techs or leasing people to enter data. It was just like, go do it. But once they experienced ChatGPT and said, oh my God, here's how I'm using the data, now they're much more active about entering data and following this. So where I'm going with this, I think part of it, and I think, 10 to 20% in the organization will get it. And they like change, they'll see the opportunity and jump in. I think 60 to 70% of an organization just kind of nods, but they want to see it and experience it. And then you got 20 to 30% that's white blood cells and will fight it and give you 50 reasons to do no. Changing an organization completely is impossible. So it's really, you want to do things at the side of the organization, scale them, get proof points, get people to experience it, and have people head that direction versus trying to force and mandate change. We had Scott Cook come in. Scott was the founder of Intuit. And one of the things he had said that really resonated is repetition doesn't ruin the prayer. And by that, you have to say the same thing over and over and over again. And he was like, the time I get so tired of myself saying it, I want to punch myself in the face, he's like, that's when people finally get it. And I think as people are pushing change in the organization, the key things are, even if you have the world's greatest idea or technology, the adoption internally is going to be hard because you're asking people to change. So really understanding and being clear about here's the outcome, here's the benefit, and finding those advocates to get the data and experiencing it. And I'm a fairly capable storyteller, but I found that like I'll talk to something and I can just see people's eyes rolling in their head because they just have no idea how to experience it. But the instant they start using the tool or they see how it changes, they suddenly become the advocates and they can do it. So it's how do you create those small little pilots that people can feel and touch that they then can grab by the horns and start driving. And then organizationally, how do we funnel out and up-level the white blood cells? I mean, there are people who just, regardless of how great something is, will fight it. And unfortunately, that in the environment we're in now, like we need to continually be moving ahead. And it's like riding a bike. Like the instant you stop pedaling, you're going to fall over. So those that want to keep fighting for what's been in the past, it's really tough to push change in an organization.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great way to end. Thank you, Will. This is great.
No worries.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.